Okay, welcome to our class on GPS for the soul, beginning guide to Tanya. We're on chapter 9, and tonight we're going to talk about the Tzaddik. So what comes to mind for me is, with as much as I understand about Hasidus and Tzaddikim in general, my thought is when I was doing business and life coaching, we would talk about establishing goals. If you don't know where you want to go, then you're not going to get there. So you have to figure out what your goals are. If you plan really good goals, or as I teach my cadets, SMART goals, and each of the letters is an acronym for, a specific and measurable time-related goal, but we put these goals together. When you create a really audacious goal, even if you reach for the sky, if you don't make it, you can land in the trees. That's not bad either, right? So the idea is that we want to set big goals. We want to have things that lead us forward, that guide us forward. And even if we don't reach them directly, we can still get to a good spot because we actually took on a really audacious goal. So in that context, we'll start with the first story that he brings in the chapter here, which I think is a fascinating story because this Elazar comes, he himself is a Talmud Chacham, he's a great scholar himself. He starts to learn Chassidus, and at some point, a few years into his study, they ask him, you're really anxious to come and learn Chassidus. You were already a great Talmud Chacham, a great scholar. What happened? What changes for you? What did you come for? And he shares that he used to say to himself, "Self, you are a great tzaddik, a scholar. You're always involved in Torah and doing mitzvahs. How can God make a heaven big enough for you?" And I tell myself, well, God is infinite. He can surely make it happen. Once he learns a little bit of Chassidus and starts learning deeper into Chassidus, he begins to understand a much bigger picture. And now he has the understanding of Elazar, you are so self-centered and egotistic. Your Torah study is for your own honor, your own self-aggrandizement. You're far from being selfless. It's in prayer, you constantly think only about yourself. How could God even stand you? The question is different, but the answer is the same. God is infinite, he can make room. And I think that's the biggest perspective of what we're looking at in this chapter, is that if we understand the bigger picture, if we understand the bigger goal, in one sense, it can be depressing in the sense that we're nowhere near that. So that can bring us down. But at the same sense, it can also inspire us if we understand what the real goals are. When I was teaching in a classroom environment, one of the things we talked about as teachers was to be able to set high expectations, because the class is more likely to deliver higher if your expectations are higher. If you set low expectations, don't worry, they will definitely deliver. So our expectations. I just came away from cadet officer school at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And these were all teenagers that were there. They're all teenagers, right? But they were told from the get-go, you are all officers. You will be treated as officers. And hence we expect that you will always behave as officers. The expectations were high set. And by and large, they pretty well delivered. They made good on it. We set a high expectations that they would be on their absolute best behavior, and they would be behaving not as typical American teenagers, but as Air Force officers, and they delivered. So we were very proud of them. So again, I think it's the matter of really setting the bar high. So what does that bar look like? Well, a tzaddik. Tzaddik we've talked about so far. We said that a tzaddik is the person who is a righteous person, and we had defined the Beinoni as the person who never sins, not in thought, speech, or action, not even in thought or speech. And that's just a Beinoni. So what's a tzaddik? And that's what we want to be focusing on tonight. So the idea is to be able to understand what a tzaddik is, and in order and understanding that, to then look up to that inspirational idea to raise up our own standards, bring us higher. And we want to look at not just the external aspect. Here's where we're going to make a shift from what we've done before, right? Before we talked about a tzaddik is someone who doesn't sin, not in action, not in speech, not even in thought, right? We're going to take it a little bit deeper now, and we're going to start looking at not so much that judgment scale of right or wrong, but we're actually going to look a little bit deeper and say, what's going on in that internal war? We're constantly at battle between the good side and the bad side. The animal inclination of the physical body and the spiritual inclination of the godly soul. Both of these are fused together and they have to work together. What's that internal battle really look like, right? So I'm now looking at bottom page 84, the tzaddik, the beinoni, and the rasha, the rishonim. The tzaddik, the beinoni, rasha can be understood on different levels. There's the external level, which we've talked about. And then there's that the beinoni has that equal balance of both on the external side of things, but on a deeper level, the concept of who's a tzaddik, who's a rasha, who's a beinoni is, again, that internal struggle between the souls. And if we look deeper now at the perspective on who is a tzaddik, who is a rasha, what's the difference between those? And even finer, that age-old question of why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people, right? Why do we have the idea of a tzaddik v'raloi and a tzaddik v'tovloi and a rasha tzaddik, a rasha v'raloi, rasha v'tovloi? The tzaddik and baddest things are bad for him, and the rasha things are good for him. Like, we're going to look at that aspect as well, right? So we said that the right chamber of the tzaddik's heart, the right chamber, it has become filled of the godly soul, so much so that it has spilled over into the left chamber, and the evil inclination has been evicted. So a tzaddik is the one where it is no longer the battle, but rather he's won. There's the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has been eradicated from within him. Not only thought, speech, and action, but even on the deeper emotional traits, he's completely vanquished the evil inclination, the animal soul, the desire for evil. The beinoni is the one who has evil still in his heart. Undesirable thoughts show up, but he beats them down every time. And so therefore he doesn't even entertain the thought. Now what's different is that the tzaddik has already won the battle. The thoughts don't even come up. The beinoni is still in the fight. The beinoni is still in the battle. And even though the negative thoughts or the unholy thoughts will come up to his mind, he fights them off. And he does so with both hands. The tzaddik is the one who it's already done. The battle's already conquered, right? So those thoughts don't even come up anymore, which is an interesting thing to think about for a second, right? Someone who never has negative thoughts, someone who never has anti-godly thoughts. I don't even know what that would feel like.
Well, what I'm wondering about is with the rasha. He always has only bad thoughts and evil intentions.
Oh, so what's the rasha v'tovloi? The rasha who the evil one who's good? They're the good for him. What does that mean? Right. That's what I'm going to cover today.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm wondering about. Okay.
So when we talk about the tzaddik, right? We said the tzaddik is a complete tzaddik in the sense that He doesn't sin in thought, speech, or action. Sinful thoughts don't even come up to his mind, right? So, what is a tzaddik v'raloi? The tzaddik who it's bad for him. What does that mean? What does that look like, right? So when we want to talk about, well, let's go into the kosher industry, right? We have meat and dairy. We keep the pots and pans completely separate. We keep the dishes completely separate, everything separate. What happens if in the process of making, let's say we have a pot full of milk and a piece of meat falls in? All right, now what?
Depends on the proportion of the meat.
It
Proportion.
completely depends on the portion.
Mhm.
The portion of the meat and the portion of the milk.
Yeah.
In other words, if you have a ratio of 100 to 1, or is it a ratio of 1,000 to 1, and that makes a difference. It could be that you couldn't eat the food, but the pot doesn't have to be kosher. It doesn't have to be burned out, right? But it could be that that even the pot has to be burnt out, right? It depends on the ratio. So the same thing when it comes to Passover, chametz, the tiniest amount of chametz, of leavening, makes the whole thing problematic for Passover. So ratio makes a big difference. And now when we go back and we look at the tzaddik, right? The tzaddik may have some residue left over from when he wasn't a tzaddik. And that's the part that's veraloi, that's bad for him. Meaning he may be an incomplete tzaddik. You know, he doesn't do anything in thought, speech, or action, but there's still a vestige left of those old animal traits. And his ideas may not be completely holy. And one of the ways we look at this is how repulsed is the tzaddik by something ungodly. I remember somebody who had come from Russia. He had come from really hard conditions in Russia, but he was a very holy guy. And he came to America and he saw a billboard with a scantily clad woman sitting on a fancy car. And the disrespect for human what's the word I want to look for? Modesty, literally made him puke. He saw the poster and he literally puked at the lack of modesty displayed in such a public forum. So here's somebody who had refined himself to that degree that such a poster, a billboard, even just that physically, he had a physical reaction to it, right? So when a person is a tzaddik and he's a complete tzaddik, meaning it's good for him, he's done the full amount, right? So not only does he never think of anything negative, but he's actually physically repulsed by anything that's anti-godly, and to a level of a physical reaction to it. Whereas someone who is not complete tzaddik, they're tzaddik, but not so complete tzaddik, Virala, it's not good for them, it's bad for them. They may not be as repulsed. They may, at the same time, be holy and not have any thoughts, deeds, or actions, but they're not repulsed. When I think of this, I think, for example, of those people that have quit smoking. Most of them are very repulsed at the idea of smoking. So they've gone to an extreme, and that's the level of a perfect tzaddik. Now, there certainly is a higher level even than that, where the tzaddik is no longer repulsed by the other stuff, but he doesn't even see it. You know, when a person is so holy that they only see good, they may look at someone who's doing something inappropriate, and they'll only see the positive side. The Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev was famous for this. He was such a holy guy. He would see. You know what? I'm going to tell you a specific story right now. There's a guy, a veteran I know named Sheldon. And Sheldon is right now, he's in South Korea, retracing his steps from when he served in Korea. He had received a pair of tefillin from the Lubavitcher Rebbe when he went into Korea. And he put on the tefillin every day. And there's some miracle stories that happened in the journey. Hopefully we'll be able to share some of that with you, and maybe even have him as a guest speaker sometime. But it's a beautiful story that he shares about that. But let me tell you a different story about Sheldon when he was a little boy. Oh, was he a troublemaker? He was 10 years old. He was kicked out of already multiple yeshivas in Brooklyn. His mother was beside herself with what to do about this kid. And she took him to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And she cried her heart out to the Rebbe, what am I going to do with this kid? Anyway, at some point, the Rebbe turns to Sheldon. And he says in Yiddish, "Du bist a good Yingel, you're a good boy?" And Sheldon said, "No." "Do you like yeshiva?" "No." "Do you behave yourself?" "No." The Rebbe turned to his mother and smiled and said, "Oh, that emes. He only speaks the truth. What a beautiful boy." But that was a turning point, that the Rebbe would recognize that this 10-year-old, he wouldn't say yes to be comfortable. He'd tell the truth, right? And the Rebbe would found the good, didn't even see the negative stuff, sees only the good. That's already a higher level of the tzaddik. But what we're talking about is the level of how repulsed is the person by things that they're anti-good, that they're anti-God, right? And that's going to be the difference between the tzaddik v'tovah, the tzaddik v'raleh, the tzaddik who's good for him, meaning he is absolutely repulsed by evil, and the tzaddik v'raleh, it doesn't bother him so much.
So isn't that kind of, doesn't that go against the grain? You say the tzaddik who can't see evil, sees only good, as compared to the tzaddik who's repulsed. The tzaddik who's repulsed can be somebody who takes action against that, where the tzaddik who doesn't see it won't do anything about it because he's looking at only the good. Didn't Hashem reward?
So we're talking about the tzaddik v'tovah, the one who's good for him. He's the tzaddik who's repulsed by anything that's anti-God. The tzaddik v'raleh, he's on a lower level because he doesn't engage or think about or have any involvement with the evil, but it doesn't bother him. It doesn't disturb him. I introduced a third level, which is the even higher level, which is the tzaddik who sees the negative, understands it, looks past that to seek and draw out only the positive. That's very few. That's very few.
But I'm questioning the being on a higher level, because Hashem rewarded action against evil that was taken upon him.
So listen. So you listen to what we're saying, right?
Bringing out the good is action against evil.
Yes. In other words, one of the things we talk about, you have two ways. Chassidus talks about two ways to fight evil, right? You can try and engage the evil, or you can bring in light. And the bringing in light will automatically vanquish the evil by itself. The highest level, where we're focusing on the good, we're shining a light on the good, we're highlighting the good, that in itself will vanquish the evil by focusing on the good. That's what brings it out. So that's the highest of the levels. We're looking at, I'm on page 88 now, the world of Atzilus. So the idea of Atzilus, there are different levels, different, when we talk about, seventh heaven, right? Different levels of the spiritual realms. And the four primary spiritual realms, the highest is Atzilus. That's the world of emanation in English. But Atzilus is a level where it's still totally God. And whatever movement towards a physical universe that exists in the level of Atzilus is completely nullified by the infiniteness of God. There's a movement towards a finite world, but unperceptible because the infinite is so infinite. The next level coming down, that's the world of Bria, and that's the world of creation. And I don't mean physical creation. We're not there yet. This is the idea of creation of an existence that in some ways is somewhat separate from the infinite God in order to start creating another world. Yetzirah is the next world down. That's the world of formation, Yetzirah. And in that form and that level, we're now starting to talk about at least spiritual creations, but we're not physical yet. The lowest world, Asiya, the world of action, now that's the world of the physical world that you and I are most familiar with, right? Atzilus is distinguished from the other three because it's completely surrendered to God. It's so completely spiritual. There's nothing physical about it, not even the level of any level. Rather, it's the beginning of the stages that are necessary to hide the infinite God through vessels and curtains and shades in order to be able to, that there should be a physical world that is not completely nullified by God's grandeur. The souls of the complete tzaddikim, their souls come from Atzilus. The souls of the incomplete tzaddikim, they'll come from Bria or Yetzirah or Asiya, but they're still more partial to the world. The one from Atzilus is already a neshama, a soul that's coming from that infinite level. And the goal of a tzaddik, a perfect tzaddik, is to be able to bring that spiritual level of Atzilus down into a physical realm through their service of God and feeling constantly connected to God. Because in Atzilus, there's nothing outside of God. There's nothing separate yet. And so the neshama, the soul that's coming from that level, is coming down to here to be able to share some insights from that level where everything is completely nullified to God. B'nai Aliyah, people of ascent, that's the complete tzaddik. And they're at that level, not only where they fight evil, but at a level where they actually take that and transform the evil into good, where they take darkness and make it into light. These are the tzaddikim of this level where their learning and their performance of mitzvahs is not about them. It's just straight a chariot to God. There's nothing in them about it. Whereas an incomplete tzaddik, he loves God. He wants to be close to God. He wants to do the mitzvahs. He's involved. That's a tzaddik v'ralei, the imperfect tzaddik, the one to whom there's still a him as part of this. The complete tzaddik, the tzaddik v'tovlei, the holy tzaddik, the most holy tzaddik, that is a person who's just a chariot to God. There's nothing about him involved. It's all about God. It's completely devoid of any ego or anything in it. So as we wrap up, let's conclude here. Page 90, the conclusion, right? So the tzaddik is not merely someone who does a lot more good than he does evil, but rather he is someone who has already banished all personal evil from within him. The battle is over. The Bainani still has to fight the fight. The Rasha has a huge fight still ahead of him, right? But the tzaddik has a title. He's already the heavyweight champion. It's already done. It's not that he has another battle to fight. It's already complete. He's already wiped out the evil within him. How much so? To what degree has it been nullified by the good? Okay, so the tzaddik v'rasha, tzaddik v'rala, tzaddik v'tovle. Tzaddik who's incomplete, but then there's the complete tzaddik whose soul comes from the essence of Atzilus, where there's nothing else but God, and therefore he's completely nullified himself, completely nullified to God, just like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who we call the Avos, they were also called the Merkovos, the chariots, because just like the chariot driver, the chariot is nothing of its own. It only responds to what the driver wants. So too, the perfect tzaddik is the one who is just in response to God, nothing of his own in it. It's not him learning Torah. It's not him basking in God's glory. It's just God alone. So again, not that we're going to reach this level. This is, the source of where the neshamas are coming from is already a much higher level. But the idea is to know that such a thing exists gives us the opportunity to be able to connect with the tzaddik of the generation and be able to know what that looks like. To know someone that's that selfless is to be inspired by the opportunity to lift ourselves a tefach higher. A tefach is a fist breath, right? To be inspired enough to lift ourselves to do something more, right? Whether that something more is to do one more mitzvah, or to do a better level of a mitzvah, or to engage someone else in helping to do the mitzvah, whatever that is, the tzaddik is the one who inspires us to be able to lift ourselves a little bit higher in the world. I want to give a quick preview for next week, where we're going to answer the question that Bernie had, right? Which was about how do you have someone, a rasha v'tovle, a wicked person who's good for him. What does that mean, right? So most of us fit in this category. Most of us, all right, let me speak for myself. I can't get through the day without any negative thoughts, without any animalistic thoughts. I typically, I'm just going to give a simple example without getting too overly personal, but food is a big struggle. My animal likes chocolate cake. I was at a wedding last night, and I did pretty good. Until the chocolate pettifors came out. And I only had 7 varieties, right? So I only had 1 until I had the second. I think I had 7 by the time we leave. So the rasha, the wicked one, is the wicked one who falls, but he frequently repents. In fact, he does it every day. And in fact, I have it on good knowledge that we do it multiple times in a day. Now, why do I say we have that on good knowledge? Because if we know that we don't make a blessing with God's name in vain. We never make a blessing in vain, right? So in Shemona Esrei, the daily prayers, morning, afternoon, and evening, we mention God's name, that he forgives us our sins. And we do it 3 times a day and once more before going to bed. So that means I blow it before morning services. I blow it again by the time my afternoon services come around, I've blown it again before the evening service comes around. And between that and going to bed, I did it again. So I have it on good knowledge that 4 times a day, I actually use God's name to thank him for forgiving me for my stuff. So thought, speech, actions, the Rasha v'tovle, the wicked one who prospers, is the one who sins and does it frequently, thought, speech, hopefully not action, but it happens. But he is constantly repenting. He's constantly trying to improve. He's constantly asking for forgiveness. He's aware of his errors. So in that sense, yes, he's a Rasha, he's wicked at the moment he sins. He's separate, because remember, the Jewish idea of sin is not the Christian hellfire and brimstone, right? The Jewish concept of a sin is someone who has separated himself from God. He's pulled himself away from it, right? So it's the same thing with any kind of relationship we have with a best friend, with a colleague at work, with a spouse. You know, we do something that irritates the other person, intentionally, not intentionally, but we do it, and that causes a separation, right? So the same thing, every time we sin, thought, speech, or action, something anti-godly, that's considered a chet, a sin, because we've made a blemish in the relationship we have with God. So the the wicked one who prospers is the wicked one who's constantly doing tshuva every day, constantly doing tshuva, trying to repent, but falling, but not staying down, right? Fall off a horse, you get back up on the horse, right? The goal is to keep getting back up, and not to stumble. And that's the goal of the Rasha. And we'll talk more about that one, God willing, next week.